I need you all the week, all the time.
Oh, God. I'll just live inside your trousers or something. It'll be much easier.
What are you, going to turn into a pair of knickers?
It's the night of the 17th of December, 1989, and somewhere in the English countryside, a radio enthusiast is scanning between frequencies often used by police officers and pirate radio DJs when he stumbles across a private phone conversation between a man and a woman.
Oh, darling, I just want you now.
Do you? So do I.
Desperately, desperately, desperately.
It's obvious they're lovers, but would that be enough reason to press record on a scanner?
I do love you, and I'm so proud of you.
Oh, I'm so proud of you.
It's more that this man's voice sounds familiar.
Yes, you have.
No, I haven't.
Prince Charles.
Anyway, that's the sort of thing one has to be aware of.
Eldest son to Queen Elizabeth II, future King of England. Married to arguably the world's most famous woman, Diana, Princess of Wales. The woman on the other end of the line doesn't sound like his wife, the mother of his two young sons, William and Harry.
It would be so wonderful to just have one night to set us on our way, wouldn't it?
Wouldn't it? To wish you a happy Christmas.
Who could he be talking to? This woman, seemingly unknown, not only to the radio scanner, but to most people around the world. All of that will change when this recorded tape goes public. It will change everything.
Your greatest achievement is to love me.
Oh, darling, easier than falling off a chair.
As our reconstruction reminds us, this sexually loaded conversation will make global headlines and in doing so threaten the future of Prince Charles and the monarchy as we know it.
People were openly speculating that he just couldn't carry on.
Who was the other woman in the recording? It was to change her life in ways she could never have imagined. This 42-year-old married mother is about to become public enemy number one. Camilla Parker Bowles.
Camilla, I think it's fair to say, was probably one of the most loathed people in the country at the time.
The mistress of the future king will be a main player in this scandalous soap opera that was to take a very tragic turn.
We're just receiving the sad news here at Sky Centre that Diana, Princess of Wales, has in fact been killed in that car accident.
Shocking, unbelievable tragedy. Diana was dead. Charles travelled to Paris to bring back the body of his ex-wife. Who was to blame for her death? How could Charles have left her for his mistress, Camilla? Hatred by the British public of Camilla was to reach new levels and would take another 2 decades to dissipate. And in this love story, no one ever could have imagined that Camilla Parker Bowles might one day be crowned.
But of course it's a great honour. It couldn't be anything else.
2023, and she does become Queen. We've spoken to the people who've been part of this journey, behind the scenes during the dark days, close friends, former staff. I'm Kay Burley, and from Sky News, this is Queen Camilla for the Love of Charles. To understand this story and what happens next, we need to go back to the beginning. Camilla Rosemary Shand was born in London on the 17th of July 1947 at King's College Hospital to Rosalind and Bruce Shand, a retired army major. Imagine an old 18th century country house set in more than 5 acres of East Sussex countryside with an orchard, a pool and a paddock. This is where Camilla Shand grew up. Her childhood would leave an indelible mark, as she explains in the ITV documentary Camilla's Country Life.
Summers were sort of idyllic because we could go across the downs and into the sea. I love swimming and I love English sea.
I think she had a pretty fabulous childhood, though, a little bit free range.
For friend and author Cathy Lett, Camilla's childhood was something straight out of an Enid Blyton novel.
Galloping horses over the moors, she had a wonderful brother who was a bit of a rascal and a bit of a vagabond, and I think that she had such a close bond with him. You know, imagine it was idyllic.
The eldest of 3 children, Growing up, Camilla was very close to her youngest sibling, Mark. She also had a sister, Annabel. Born into wealth, Camilla and her siblings were part of Britain's privileged elite.
The Queen Consort carries in her DNA the most remarkable number of antecedent lines.
A family lineage so notable that it's better explained by the Governor of Edinburgh Castle and our royal expert, Major General Alistair Bruce.
It's quite difficult to find many families that have perhaps so many links as the Queen Consort's does to her husband's family. There was, after all, a relationship through Henry Cavendish, who was the second Duke of Newcastle, and that makes both the Queen Consort and the King ninth cousins once removed.
Aged 10, Camilla left home for the private Queensgate School in London, South Kensington. Here, to her friends, she was known simply as Milla. Popular, but something of an average student, she would leave for finishing school in Switzerland at the age of 16, with just one O-level.
I think in some ways it was very restrictive, the world she grew up in. Girls were brought up to be decorative and demure. And when she was coming of age was just the time that the women's liberation movement was sparking off. And yet she wasn't expected to take any part in that. You know, she had to be a debutante because girls were really just of that class were just seen to be a life support system to their womb.
By 1965, the now 18-year-old Camilla found work as a secretary in London, but her social life was to prove far more significant. A debutante, Camilla attended high society social events for eligible singles, a place to meet the landed gentry, and even a prince or two.
She was supposed to then be moulded, go to a finishing school. I mean, even the term finishing school is such a horrible expression. It's like, you know, your ambitions are over. You are finished. And now you will be put on the shelf until some man picks you up as a trophy wife and puts you on his own mantelpiece. So, you know, I can imagine it was quite restrictive.
Camilla met Charles in the early 1970s. There was an instant attraction, but the relationship was considered unsuitable by the royal family. And Camilla was instead to go on to meet and marry Major Andrew Parker Bowles. He was of good stock, having been a page boy at Queen Elizabeth II's coronation back in 1953. But the connection with Charles was unbreakable, and they continued on with their tryst. Simon McCoy was Sky News' first royal correspondent.
Charles fell helplessly in love with her at the time, but she wasn't suitable. He became, I suspect, besotted in a way with her, but his life took him somewhere else.
Kathy Lett.
I think definitely Camilla found her knight in shining Armani. And in Camilla, I think Charles found a woman who didn't put him on a pedestal and could see, you know, the vulnerability and the gentleness of him, and not just be in awe, not be overawed by the position. And that must be quite hard to find a woman who's not overawed by that. And the fact that she could tease him, you know, and make him laugh and make him feel real.
Many of us could only dream of making this romantic fairy tale connection, but it seemed to be a relationship that had no future. Camilla was married to someone else. Even if she divorced Andrew Parker Bowles, a senior member of the royal family at that time, Charles, could never be seen to be marrying a divorcee. This relationship just wasn't meant to be. It's now July 1975 in the Cotswolds, Gloucestershire, at Cirencester Park Country House, where a polo game has just finished. Stood under a beech tree is a woman, slim with blonde hair and a red shirt. It's Camilla, and she's deep in conversation with one of the polo players, Prince Charles. Behind them, on the tree, there's a fresh carving, their initials intertwined, a symbolic declaration of love. At least that's how I saw it at the time.
She married her husband while still having a relationship with Charles, because it was felt Charles wasn't ready. Also, Charles had other women on the go as well. So he didn't choose Camilla then, but she stayed in his life They were clearly very close, and she clearly meant an awful lot to him.
This is Phil Craig, author of the best-selling book Diana, Story of a Princess.
He travelled the world. He had a series of relationships with all the glamorous people. He was a philosopher prince, I think, in his own mind. Happy in his circle of friends. He loved his life and he didn't particularly want to change it.
By now, Camilla is mother to her first child, Tom, the well-known food writer. She and Charles continue to be very close friends. Meantime, the royal household is focusing on a more suitable bride for the Playboy prince. Eligible young women like Lady Sarah Spencer. She soon tires, though, of the future king, telling Time magazine she wasn't in love with Charles. "I wouldn't marry anyone I didn't love, whether he were the dustman or the King of England," she's reported to have said. Charles turns to her younger sister, Diana. Everything Camilla wasn't. Unattached, virtuous, and a virgin. She was a perfect match and an ideal future queen.
She'd been raised in and around people like Charles, and people who'd known Charles, and her own sister who had dated Charles. She knew so much about his circle, she knew so much about his love life, and she knew an awful lot about the man he was before she met him. And that included Camilla.
From that quiet country setting, the story now moves to London and St Paul's Cathedral. It's the 29th of July 1981. A throng, 6 deep, camera crews from the 4 corners of the globe had gathered. A mind-boggling 750 million people around the world are tuning in to watch the fairy tale wedding of Prince Charles and Lady Diana Spencer, a new record for a live TV event. Public interest in the love story of a handsome prince and his 20-year-old bride is on a scale like no other. I vividly remember watching Diana at the time walking into St Paul's, beautiful, young, adored by the public, the people's princess. Her wedding dress is an ivory silk taffeta and an antique lace gown with a 25-foot train and 153 yards of tulle veil. The initials of the happy couple embroidered onto the heel of each of her shoes. The magic of the moment remains one of the standout memories of my career, as it was for my former colleague, Simon McCoy.
It was a remarkable day. It was a day of hope. Britain was in a difficult place, it might sound familiar, and the focus of a joyful day in July 1981, where the whole country seemed to come together, and there was parties all around the country. The weather on the day was wonderful. It was just one of those days if you were there, you would never forget, as a day of happiness. And that was reflected also in them. Let's not forget, they were happy at the beginning, and they looked it, and we all wanted that marriage to work.
Watching on were 2,500 invited guests, the Queen, the Duke of Edinburgh, overseas royals including Grace Kelly, and a woman in a pale grey dress and a pillbox hat, Camilla. As Diana floated down the aisle, she glimpsed up from underneath her legendary fringe and spotted Charles's close friend, his hunting partner, his sometimes dinner date.
Camilla made every effort to be nice to Diana at the beginning. She invited her to her home. They went out for lunch. She sent her little cards. So excited about the engagement. Can't wait to see the ring.
Phil Craig again.
I think that this accommodation, as I call it, wasn't perfect. Sometimes if Camilla was paraded too publicly, Diana would kick off and get very cross. But actually, it did sort of work for them. Funnily enough, it's the period of Diana's real rise to international public success. In those very early years, he, I suspect, does back off from being Camilla's lover, but I do think he gave Diana every reason to believe that he wasn't really committing to the marriage with her.
As Diana becomes Princess of Wales, and with Prince Charles they begin married life together, this joyous union starts to unstick. Within months of the wedding, the reality of life inside the royal family and a growing awareness that her new husband was continuing to remain in touch with his old love becomes just too much for a depressed Diana. Desperate and 4 months pregnant with Prince William, the young princess hurls herself down a set of stairs at Sandringham in what she later says was a cry for attention from her husband. Through his work documenting the story of Diana, author Phil Craig says the relationship between Charles and Camilla would have been at the forefront of Diana's tormented mind.
And the story that comes out from her is that as the marriage to Diana unravelled, Charles began to need her again. Not necessarily sexually, just as a friend, somebody who could offer the kind of support that Diana wasn't able to offer, didn't want to offer. And I've no doubt that they did become lovers again, not that long after the marriage. But I suspect that Camilla wanted Diana to have the chance to make the relationship work.
And so, in the summer of 1982, Diana gives birth to Prince William. 2 years later, he's joined by his little brother, Harry. I remember the moments Diana and Charles emerged from the private Lindo wing of St Mary's Hospital in London, cradling each of their sons, their faces beaming.
Your Royal Highness.
To the outside world, the model family of 4. The camera never lies, they say. Or does it? No one outside of the palace and the inner circles of Camilla, Charles and Diana could have predicted the ramifications that would soon emerge as the perfect royal family disintegrated. Not even keen royal watcher Simon McCoy.
I reported at the time that there were rumours of unhappiness in the marriage. I actually have the piece of Press Association copy where Buckingham Palace denied a report on Sky TV that the marriage of the Prince and Princess of Wales was in trouble. There was no speculation on earth that would ever have got near to the truth, which was much more devastating, frankly, than anything the papers were saying might be going on.
And they were saying plenty.
There was a huge appetite from the audiences about the stories for gossip about the royal family.
This Fleet Street insider, who was at the forefront of reporting the royal story back in the 80s, was about to play his part in one of the royal family's biggest ever scandals. He asked us to use an actor to voice his words.
There were very strict rules around privacy and things. Phone hacking wasn't even on the horizon, no. So it was just a telephone conversation. And back then, mobile phones were very easy. You could buy a scanner at the Tandy electric shop in the high street, right? And they were about 200 quid. Anybody could get them. And mobile phones back in the late 80s weren't digital. They were all the, I don't know what they were broadcasting on, but you could buy one of these scanners in the same way you could listen to a police radio and airline pilots. You could also listen to people's mobile phone conversations. Whether that was legal or not, nobody really cared.
By 1989, the new technology was being used not only by tabloid journalists, but curious radio enthusiasts too. One amateur stumbled on the private conversation between Charles and Camilla. What should he do with it? The recording finds its way to the editor of the Daily Mirror, but he faces a quandary. By publishing and exposing the affair, it may well threaten Charles's succession to the throne and the continuity of the royal family. There were also concerns about how a fragile Princess Diana would react, not to mention possible legal action. The Mirror decides not to publish the bombshell contents of the tape locked away in the newspaper's safe.
You'd think the tabloid journalists would just splash anything on the front page, but no, they were very, very careful.
Years pass, the public oblivious to the unravelling of the royal marriage. Then come allegations from Diana that would change all of that. In late 1992, Andrew Morton publishes his tell-all book written from the transcripts of tapes smuggled to him from Diana. The book would blow the lid on the lies and reveal the steamy and ongoing affair between Charles and Camilla. Here's Andrew Morton talking about what Diana had shared with him.
She watches Camilla with a brooding and morbid fascination. I remember that shortly after the separation, she discovered where Prince Charles and Camilla Parker Bowles met. She found a large-scale ordnance survey map. She pinpointed where they met. She worked out the routes that Camilla would take, the route that Charles would take. And she thinks about, well, will Charles become king? Will he run off with his woman? She doesn't know the answer to these things. Only Camilla and Charles know the answer to these things.
Simon McCoy.
This book was seminal because very quickly it was clear it was Diana's. It was her true story is the title of the book. It was her story. Much of it was true. A lot of it was powered by the anger and grief of a woman who was feeling unloved at the time. And that was very powerful. Behind the scenes, she was calling Camilla a Rottweiler, and that was a tag that stuck.
Surely it couldn't be true. The Mirror, though, knows that it is. They have the tape. Rumours continue to swirl in the drinking haunts of Fleet Street journalists. Something would have to give. Newspapers start to suggest not all is well behind the palace gates. However, who could ever have guessed what would happen next? Prime Minister John Major breaks the news to the nation.
It is announced from Buckingham Palace that with regret the Prince and Princess of Wales have decided to separate. Their Royal Highnesses have no plans to divorce and their constitutional positions are unaffected.
The situation was about to get a whole lot worse for Charles and Camilla. It's the morning of the 13th of January, 1993. More than 10,000 miles from London, the other side of the world in Sydney, Australia, and a little-known glossy magazine, New Idea, publish the biggest story of its 100-year history. They have the tape. Remember, a copy of which is in the Daily Mirror's safe back in London? The Mirror's lawyers, too cautious to have printed it at the time. Australia's less stringent libel laws mean the details of Charles and Camilla's teen-like exchange under wraps for so long would soon be plastered on front pages right around the world. It had been 3 years since the recording of the private conversation. The couple had never expected that their raw, unedited love for each other could be laid bare to the world.
You're awfully good feeling your way along.
Oh, stop. I want to feel my way along you. All over you, and up and down you, and in and out.
Oh, Charles.
Particularly in and out.
Wow. That is just what I need at the moment.
But that's exactly what happens. New Idea publish the transcript in full. Royal shocker. Charles and Camilla's sensational love tape. Charles rocked by Camilla tape shock. Camillagate may keep Charles off throne. British titles scramble to republish New Idea's report.
It's out now. It's out. You cannot stick the cat back in the bag once it's out. There's now a global village. Faxes are sending this over to every newsroom in the country. I mean, there's some journalists in my newsroom acting it out in front of their colleagues right now, playing the various parts.
Simon McCoy.
The tapes, when they came out, were utterly devastating. The Sun newspaper put them on a constant loop that you could dial into to listen to. Nobody really knew the name Camilla Parker Bowles until Camillagate. And the release of this devastating conversation between Charles and Camilla, which, left nothing to the imagination in terms of how far their relationship had gone.
Camillagate and Tampongate were born.
The press knew that Camilla was having a relationship with Charles long before it was published. And then eventually, when it was starting to be published, nobody believed it. It was just gossip. It's ridiculous. This is just gossip.
Here's our Fleet Street insider again.
It was, oh my God, now we can actually hear proof that Charles has been cheating on Diana. What a sado. Is this what the upper class do when they have sex? Talk about wanting to be tampons and things. I mean, I'm sure there was criticism often of the newspapers as sort of getting prurience and intrusive. But I think from memory, the overall message was that the newspapers were simply reflecting what the royal family were doing, which was, being love cheats.
For Prince Charles, the tape was cold, hard, humiliating proof of his illicit affair. An affair which now brought into question his suitability as heir to the throne.
There were lots of people saying he mustn't be king, that it would have to skip a generation. There was so much anger.
Phil Craig again.
People were openly speculating that he just couldn't carry on. I mean, he's lied about this. He's treated this future queen really badly because they're still married. They're separated at this point, but they're still married. How can he be head of the Church of England? How can he be a respectable man again?
The palace was in meltdown. Could this be the end for Charles and Camilla? Could this be the end for Charles as future king?
When the Camillagate scandal was at its height, a lot of people were saying, this is it. Charles is in real trouble, and Camilla, that's it for her.
Public enemy number one, universally hated, Camilla now stood to lose everything for the man she'd risked everything for. With rumours reaching fever pitch over the prince's royal future, and Camilla, still then Parker Bowles, facing fury both in public and in her marriage. Surely their love story was over.
Love you.
Don't want to say goodbye.
Neither do I, but you must get some sleep. Bye.
Bye, darling.
Love you.
Next time on Queen Camilla, for the love of Charles, I'll uncover the tumultuous aftermath of Camillagate.
To suddenly find yourself as public enemy number one and to be such a hate figure and be kind of on the dartboard of the national consciousness must have been horrific.
What would the future hold for the Prince and Princess of Wales?
Most people were thinking about Diana and the effect this was all going to have on her.
We're just receiving the sad news here at Sky Centre.
And a horrific tragedy that would shock the world. You can listen to all episodes now. Queen Camilla, for the love of Charles, is a Sky News podcast production presented by me, Kay Burley. The producer is Soila Apparicio. Assistant producers are Alex Edden and Lily Thomas. Sound design is by James Bradshaw. Rob Mulhern is the exec producer and Paul Stanworth, the editor.